following is a 24 Hours podcast.
And so we're halfway through. We're on to question 5 here, and Erwin will ask.
Thanks. I thought of this next question because this week I received a notice from my landlord telling me that my rent was going up again. Now, I'm not going to ask you to lower my rent, but you know that more than half of Vancouver households are, like me, renters. And what you're obviously aware of the problem our neighborhoods continue to face with redevelopment and the pressures that puts on existing affordable housing. We see more condos, and these condos are replacing the older housing, and they're invariably more expensive. And that's despite the fact that neighborhoods like the West End already have a 0% rate of change bylaw. So given that already exists and these pressures continue to occur, what specifically will you do at City Hall to increase affordability and to increase the stock of rental housing in the city?
And we'll start with Raymond Louis.
Well, thank you, Erwin, for that question. In fact, there's a 0 rate of change for the entire city now. We've blanketed it, and in fact, we moved a motion a couple of months ago to ensure that our renter stock was protected and our renters were protected, and some adjustments made to the Residential Tenancy Act so that there couldn't be rate increases unnecessarily. Too often, our renters are forced out onto their streets or out of their units because the landlord is making renovations, apparently. And what we said was that we wanted to ensure that those renovations were actually occurring, that we're not putting pressure on those renters unnecessarily and perhaps lining the pockets of some developers. Of course, it goes both ways. We want our property owners to invest in their properties as well and make sure that the upkeep is sufficient in order to maintain the quality of that housing, because too often in the downtown east side, our SROs go decrepit and people end up living in substandard facilities. So affordability is not specific to renters, but it's the continuum of housing that we have in our city that needs to be addressed. And if without that release of pressure at the middle income side, down to the person that's renting, to the people in our SROs, the whole continuum of housing creates this dynamic where the most needy end up out onto our streets and more. And that's why we've been fighting for things like Southeast Falls Creek, where there's middle income housing, a third market, a third middle income, and a third low income housing. Unfortunately, Sam Sullivan and his MPA turned that back. That was the model that we were to follow for the rest of our city, to look for ways to releasing some of that pressure across the spectrum. Specifically on lowering rents, some of it is about supply. Some of it is, my ideas are to increase within the built form an additional secondary suite in some locations where it makes sense, where you don't need a car, where the size of the building doesn't change and the number of cars won't change because they're located close to transit. And that's one way that we can actually increase housing stock much more quickly than if we were to go through this long exercise of eco-density with laneways and all that stuff, which makes sense.
I'm going to have to stop you there.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, David.
Al DeGenova.
Well, this is an area, again, about being creative in strategy and density bonusing and looking at creative building strategies. I have to say, a good example the city took initiative is on number 1 Kingsway. This is a rental building that's going up right now, soon for completion. It ties in with a community center, library, daycare, and an affordable rental market building. So it will be under the rental markets that are set out there. So an example, if you're $2.25 a square foot downtown, it will be at $2. So it will always sit under. So the city has taken an initiative to do that. I think in the development world, we need to create a bonus density program that we give them a certain amount of density, but within their model, they will either build rental stock, because folks, it just does not work today to build rental inventory. But if we create a model, and there is a model, and it's part of my solution, is to give the bonus density necessary that they will build a certain amount of rental stock, set at a certain rental rate, and capped for 10 to 20 years or a certain period. So I would think that's the best way to go.
Thanks for the question. Well, as Raymond referred to, we've been through 2 crises in the last couple of years under the NPA, starting with the Southeast Falls Creek model being ditched by Sullivan and company, which was a real blow to the prospects for affordable housing in all the new developments. Certainly the city can make commitments on city-owned land and developments that we forward to have that, to bring that back and to bring that one-third formula back into play. I think it's an appropriate one, and I've heard from people like Bob Rennie that that's where the market is now, and we need to be responding to that. So the second big blow in the last 3 years was the demolition and conversion of rental housing, and that really kicked off like wildfire in Fairview. And we started a movement in Fairview where a couple hundred people were being evicted, 5 buildings went down in a short few months, and built a movement citywide, effectively, to push for this moratorium. There was so much pressure on Sam Sullivan and the NPA that they came around and respected the fact that the majority of the residents need their housing protected, and we have to draw the line with respect to affordable rental housing. So that rate of change is going to come up again for review after this next election. We need to be committed to protecting and maintaining a level of rental housing stock, and we need to look at the next steps and building a whole lot more. We need to be working collaboratively with the development community to do this. I think Al's made some great suggestions on density bonusing that need to be looked at. We need to look at a really, really concerted push on the federal government for the tax incentives that will allow for rental housing to be built. There's a reason they haven't been built for the last couple decades. That's because it doesn't make sense in terms of taxes. So that pressure has to continue being applied, and we've got to look at all the low-income housing being maintained, again, enforcing bylaws and ensuring that the SROs, SRA housing is maintained and looked after and stays in the affordable rental market. And those are concrete steps to protect our affordable housing, and they have to be taken urgently.
Thank you.
Erwin, I just want to touch on one base that you mentioned specifically because of in the West End, I think it was, and it's tough to get, good rental rates. Another creative way, and we need to start looking for creative ways. The Coast Hotel downtown is a hotel, and the new owners would like to convert that to rental. And the city was somewhat, believe it or not, wanting to make that challenging and difficult for them because they did not want to lose the hotel stock for 2010. They agreed that they would not do the conversion until after 2010, but they said that if they can do the conversion after 2010, that they would take 20 or 25% of their building of 300 plus units and make it affordable and setting the rate lower than the market rents. I think that's another avenue that if we work with people, work with the development community, in this case the buyer of this, and we give them an incentive that we too get back a certain amount of stock so we can keep the people, especially the seniors that are living in the West End that can't always afford the increases 4.5% to 5% a year, so they can still live in their neighborhood, recreate and shop. So another creative way that we need to see and keep creating.
Thanks. I know both of you want to rebut, and Gregor caught my eye 1 second ahead. So Gregor, your turn, and then Raymond. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just, I want to expand on this issue of affordability and the reality that renters are facing, which is beyond just the price that they're paying and the pressure from the market. But we have real problems with the Rental Tenancy Act that was amended several years ago by the Campbell government. And it has many renters at risk in Vancouver, particularly in the West End, but many of our apartment districts. And the city and the mayor in particular needs to be very forceful in dealing with Victoria on this. These were unacceptable changes. They put a lot of people in this city at risk. That has to be turned around. The loopholes have to be closed. Renters have rights and they need to be respected. So that's an important step for the mayor to step up and do. And we need to look at these creative solutions. Again, the tax on speculators and the 18,000 empty condos in this city, many of those could be in the affordable rental category if we were actually doing something about it. And we need to look at inclusionary zoning, actually zoning for rental housing in parts of our city and new development that happens.
Thank you.
Vancouver.24hours.ca